Hi, this is Dennis. Today we're going to be working on a Penn Surfmaster 200. I'm going to show you how to take this reel apart, how to tune up the inside of it, how to repair it if you happen to have a broken piece. We'll work through the disassembly, we'll look at the drags, we'll look at the feature function of the reel and put it back together and put it into service. This one was bought online. Some of you may have seen my other video on how to buy a reel online. It was bought for parts or repair. So I've been repairing reels over 20 years now. And as a result of that, I'm going to use some of my experiences to show you how to take this one apart. It starts with the take apart screw. You loosen it. And then just a quick short turn, we'll open it up. This one's pretty clean inside, but I did notice that this is tough turning. This has also been around a while. The reel's probably about 40 years old. Has a lot of corrosion on the cross posts. Corrosion's okay, it doesn't affect the function of the reel. And it's totally dry, so that could be a reason why this thing is turning. So we'll show you how to lube and maintain that. And we'll start with the non-drive side plate just to get this out of the way. There should be some nice reel grease in there. There's not. I use a Penn reel grease, but there's plenty of reel greases on the market. That should go into the hole in the center and a little bit around the clicker mechanism. The hole in the center is where the back of the spool is going to seat, so we'll go ahead and go put that back in and put that together to keep that out of the way. Okay, so now let's get on to that drive side. The drive side appears to be clean, but it also appears as though the grease and everything is pretty much gone on this. So we'll go take this apart and see what's happening inside. To start with the drive side, you remove the set screw that holds the handle nut in place. That's a flathead screwdriver. The flathead screwdrivers I like to work with are the electrician's screwdrivers. I believe it's 3/16 width across the top. It fits these Penn reels perfectly. I like it with the rubber coating on it because you can twirl it without using the handle. Also, I like to keep a parts tray. In this case, it's a simple bottom of a milk jug. Okay, next up is the handle nut. I have a commercial wrench. You may have a wrench that came with the Penn reel, in which case either one of them works fine. If you're in a press, I guess you could use a pliers, but I don't really recommend it. It tends to mar up the nuts. Okay, so quick turn. This one's loose. That's a good sign. Handle comes off. And we reverse out the star drag adjuster nut. And then, as you can tell, this one's got an indentation in it inside the nut. That's to make it waterproof or hold some of the water out of the main gear by getting over that shield there. Into the parts bucket. Next up would be a ferrule, but that's not cooperating, so we'll take that out on the inside. Okay, 4 screws on this side plate, 4 screws on the back is where these will be coming out of. You're noticing I'm wearing a latex glove here. I like to do that because I'm never sure what the chemicals are inside, and I'd like to keep those off my hands if possible. I don't wear one on my right hand because it's the hand I use to unscrew and work with small parts. However, if it was a particularly nasty reel, I would be doing that. You're also noticing that I'm cupping the side plate as I'm doing this. The reason for that is there's a spring inside this on the anti-dog. I don't want to lose that spring. I call it the boing factor, but I don't want to lose that spring, so I back off all of the screws, watch the bridge fall down, and then push the bridge through and slowly remove the plate. Okay, in this case, the spring that we have is a flat-sided spring. I'll put that on my hand here so that you can see. There's 2 versions of that spring on these older reels. One of them would be a dog that has this mechanism. The other one would be a dog that has a coil spring. In both cases, these are easy to lose and hard to replace. So I would encourage you to do it just the way I did it there. Okay, setting those aside, again, it looks like the biggest problem with this reel is that it's just dry, that there really isn't any lubrication in this thing. So part of this demonstration will be to show you how to lube that up. Okay, there were 4 screws that came out. You will notice that they are different. There's a bottom set that has the fully threaded screw, and there's a top set that has a partially threaded screw. The reason for the partially threaded screw is that springs ride on these, and it makes it smooth and easier. If the spring was to ride on this, it may catch and malfunction. Into the parts bucket they go. We're going to take the assembly off next. So we have a free spool assembly here. This is what pushes down to let the free spool ride for release. There's a transition piece. There's a collar with the spool gear, completely dry. And then there's the two springs I was referring to. They sit in indentations. I'm going to put those in the parts bucket for a moment. And then I noticed that not only is it dry, but there's some dirt and grease in there. A quick shot of WD-40 will help loosen up some of that grease. The cotton swab works great in terms of mopping up some of those hard to get places. So I want to make sure that dirt and grime that was in there gets removed. It did. And then around the side. So we can see there's some dirt and grime in there. That's gone. All right, so now we're going to do just what we did on the non-dry side. We're going to lubricate where the spool rests in terms of the collar. We'll check the collar for grease next. It's got some tarnish, not a lot of grease. I'm going to use a 4.0 steel wool just to smooth that over, make sure that we get any of those contaminants off of there, because the contaminants will sit into the real lube and eventually act as a sandpaper or something to scar the metal rather than to facilitate. Okay, you're noticing I'm not putting a lot of grease on here. Just enough, right? Too much grease is as bad an issue as no grease. Again, because it tends to collect those contaminants. Those short screws go back in. The collar assembly with the open side goes up. The deep side becomes the side that the main gear drives. Center that on those springs. Push down so that it's seated over that collar that we just lubricated, and then just snap that other piece back in place. That's how you found it, only this time around it's got some lubrication. So there you go. All right, so this piece is done now, and now we'll go over and we'll work on that main gear assembly. I'll show you how to do the drags and check those for relevancy and replace them if needed. Okay, the drags sit on the main gear. Here's that ferrule that didn't cooperate coming out. Then we have the main gear assembly, which pulls off. Okay, pulling off. I like to push through on these. It just seems to be easier if the drags are stuck. At real this age, it wouldn't surprise me. So this main gear assembly is the same main gear as is in Penn Long Beach. So I just pulled the final drag out of there. There's some grease on here. I'm just going to take that steel wool and just clean that up while I'm out here. Also notice there's a piece of monofilament in here. Maybe that's what was causing the problem earlier. We'll discard that. Okay, these are flexible, which is great. You don't need to replace these. I'm going to use some drag grease. In this case, this is Cal's drag grease. Put a little bit on each side. Again, moderation is a key here. You don't need to over lube it, but you do need to keep it on there so that these do keep flexible. Checking these, the rest of the drag assemblies here. I see that these got pressed on. All right, so we have the one there, then comes metal, and then comes another one of those, and then comes the one that has the little studs on each side, and then comes the last of the fabric gears, and then the top gear and the cap nut. So we put the first one back in already. A completely round washer goes in next. Again, we'll be back to put some lube on the next of the fabric washers there. Again, not too much. Now we're looking for the eared drag. That's the one that has the 2 points on each side. And you'll notice that there's an indentation in the main drag that these sit in. So there's just a little piece there. Make sure that it gets in there. If it's not going to be properly seated and your reel will not function. Now we're going to go for the last of the fabric drags. I got to say, overall, I'm happy with the condition of the internals of this reel. This reel is going to last a long time. We'll go out and see if we can find some parts to pretty up the cosmetics. But as far as the reel functioning, this reel will work ideally. So this reel shares a lot of parts. We were just talking, it shares the main drag system with the Long Beach. Parts are available through pennparts.com if you want to go do that. Get some replacement drags, want to or need to. They're available there. Here's your collar. Here's the last washer we're going to work on here. If you want to get replacement metal pieces, you can do that as well with the cross posts and the reel seats and the like. Just a word of caution, these reels aren't worth that much, so you may wind up spending more prettying the reel up than it's actually worth. Okay, we press down on the carrier assembly. We take the bridge and we insert it, and then we turn the reel about a quarter of a turn. That's going to set us up to put that dog back in. We take the threaded screw. Remember, there's two different ones. There's the fully threaded and there's a partially threaded. The threaded screws go on the bottom. Then we're going to take that dog that came out. We're going to put that over the threaded screw and on the tooth of the gear that sits behind that main drag wash. Now we're going to get that flat spring. The flat spring sits on top of the dog. And this is where I have a little bit of problem. Those of you who've watched my videos before know me in small pieces sometimes struggle, but eventually we get it. And I'll show you the full assemblies as soon as it's completed here. Okay, these flat springs, it's an older technology. Like I said, the newer ones have a coil spring, not a problem. They both work each way. You can see here, the flat spring is resting on top of the dog, around the metal pole, then resting on the side of this side plate here. Okay, you complete the turn then. You align it so that the gear inside is proper and that the screw is coming through, and then you start tightening that side plate screw. And as I mentioned, we have a threaded screw and then the shielded screw, which partially threaded, goes on the top. And I like to do this sort of like an automobile tire. I like to go in an X pattern, so I go bottom, top, and again I only partially thread. I don't drive these all the way home until I make sure that each one of these is connected. These are pretty tight tolerances in these reels, so if you over tighten one, you may not align the others quite right. Okay, so I've got the 4 of these tightened down. I'm going to do a test before I go any further, turning that to make sure it works. Turning on the back, we've done our job there. A little bit more maintenance now. We have that carrier transition piece. We're going to put a little bit of lubrication on that. I'm going to put a little bit on the free spool release. And I like to put a drop of reel oil, and I use Reel X in this case, right in the center spot of the main gear. Okay, that's all that's required on that. We're going to go reseat this reel. Again, just reversing the process that we did earlier. Going to lighten it, quarter of a turn. Now we're going to reassemble the balance. Check the ferrule that came out, make sure it's clean. Use a Q-tip if you like. The inside tends to get dirty, just as this one did. These are brass, so we're in good shape there. Now we're going to install that drag adjusting washer nut. Okay, put that in. Handle goes on. As I mentioned, these reels are probably 40 years old. They're sometimes called the Squidder wannabe. The Squidder is almost identical in characteristics, except that it has ball bearings on each side rather than bushings. That's okay. If you're not casting, this reel is fine and suits many of those same purposes, and will last for a long time. Okay, so now I've put the nut back in. You'll notice that there's indentations along those nuts. You need to align an indentation with that last screw hole, and now you can put that set screw on. And if I've done my job properly here, this reel should be free turning. Like I mentioned, I'll probably go out and see if I can find some parts maybe to replace the the corroded ones, but other than that, we're in good shape here. Okay, so one last thing on the tensioning of this spool. You need to have a little bit of play in that spool. That's adjusted from this back washer, and that's just a little bit, not a lot, but you'll see that that's moving a whole lot better than it was when we started. So we'll call this one a success. I hope that that's answered any questions you may have on how to rebuild a Surfmaster 200, knowing that the Surfmaster 100 is a smaller frame, but the internals are the same in terms of how to work with that. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, I ask you to subscribe to my channel. Please leave comments. I'm kind of new at this, sharing my experiences after working on reels for 20 years. But I can always work for improvements if there's things you'd like to see. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching the video.